now talking Velocity Trap from 1999, directed by Philip J. Roth. And this one stars Olivier Gruner and Georgia Fox. Gruner was actually a little bit of a favourite action hero of mine in the kind of the 90s, starring in movies like Nemesis and Automatic. Doesn't get spoken about much these days, but I quite enjoyed his work. And Gruner actually served in the military in real life and is kind of well suited, I think, to action roles. So Velocity Trap is effectively Die Hard in space. And there have been Die Hard in space style movies before. Now this one is one that is set in the kind of the far future, where humans have colonized various planets across the galaxy, and in this kind of particular kind of sort of continuity, money is just cash now. They've gotten rid of electronic banking because there was too much corruption, so it's all cash society. And Gruner's character is a cop who is trying to stamp out corruption, but gets framed himself for a death of a fellow officer, and as a kind of punishment he's put on a kind of crap detail where he has to effectively guard this kind of ship full of money which is being transported kind of long distance whilst the crew are in kind of hypersleep. He's effectively got to be the only one on kind of awake. In this time, this ship is boarded by effectively robbers, pirates, whatever you want to call them, and Gruner has to try and fend them off without a weapon. Now what will happen, you'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss Velocity Trap. So this movie actually has a surprising amount of world building. The 90s actually had quite a boom of straight-to-video kind of science fiction movie, of which Olivier Gruner actually starred in a good few of them. But this one has a surprising amount of detail in its world building. For example, the society which now relies on cash because it's kind of, you know, lots of corruption and kind of electronic banking. We've got little ads, a little bit like Starship Troopers, sort of telling you, giving you a flavour of the kind of society now. Even before we get to the story main, we learn that Gruner has got this kind of wife, and she was effectively contracted to marry another guy, and she has to kind of serve out her contract, and she had a dead daughter. So there's a lot of kind of like of setup in this movie. So this movie isn't without characterization, which is, I think, is pretty good. So we get a good amount of world building before we even really get to our main portion of the story. There was a little bit of a drawback with that, but I'll kind of come on to that. But, you know, hats off for kind of building an interesting kind of world here in terms of setting the rules. The movie actually has a surprising amount of comedy in it without being a comedy movie. One of the kind of the funnier moments here is Gruner's effectively sort of persona, where he doesn't really have much of a sense of humour in his character. But then that kind of makes him funny because he's kind of not reacting to things, and there's a few kind of gags like that. We also have Gruner trying to kind of like pass away the time before we actually get raided by our criminals. He's effectively the only one, you know, kind of awake on the ship, and is ultimately getting bored and ends up kind of like dancing around the ship and in some kind of bizarre sequences and things like this. And I have to say as well, despite this being a low budget film in the 90s, I don't think the VFX are that bad. I mean, the ships and stuff are clearly CGI, but again, we have to think about the budget, and we have to think about the time this movie was made. I didn't think the CGI kind of like spaceships were actually that bad looking, if I'm honest. I think they did a reasonable job for the time and the budget. And it has to be said as well, the sets, I mean, they look a little bit kind of hokey, I guess, and maybe not the most realistic sets, but nonetheless, I gotta say, I think, you know, you get a good sort of science fiction kind of world building, and you have this all these kind of sets that represent this kind of this city before we kind of get onto the ship, that kind of reminds you of like a Total Recall aesthetic, and then obviously the actual kind of set of this kind of spaceship itself, I didn't think looked too bad. I quite like the fact as well where we have this massive monetary prize, this $40 billion. That is the amount that's being kind of transported here. Even the most kind of altruistic of characters in the movie people start to kind of like distrust each other because of the amount of money that's involved here. So you have this kind of between villains and kind of like protagonists about, is there going to be the double crossing involved? Can you really trust one another? Even with Olivier Gruner's character himself, he's questioned and things like that. So I kind of quite like the idea here that, you know, there's a massive amount of money could potentially corrupt even the most uncorruptible, which I kind of found quite fun. So I feel there's a lot of elements here. A lot of these kind of low budget sci-fi movies that came out were very simple, didn't really worry too much about the kind of the smaller elements, but I think this movie to a large degree does. In regard to the action itself, it's pretty good. I don't think it's anything kind of like outstanding, but it's a serviceable action movie in regards to its kind of set pieces, fight sequences and things like that. What doesn't work, I think the only thing of having a kind of a lot of world building like this, I mean, we get a kind of a murder sequence at the beginning, the setup. You feel like you're waiting a while for the actual story to start in earnest. I mean, it's nearly halfway through the movie when we have Gruner aboard this ship and it kind of getting, on his journey effectively, because there's so much set up before that. So when you actually get to the story part that is the kind of the heist or the kind of the robbery, it's maybe a little bit truncated. I think there's only like a very small amount of kind of like raiders. Again, maybe because the time constraints here were somewhat compacted, so it's not a huge amount of them. It's not like Die Hard where we had like 11, 12 kind of bad guys you had to take care of. Here there's considerably less than that, which makes the stakes a little less kind of exciting, to be honest with you. But there is only a few of them, and the first one is dispatched pretty quickly. Olivier Gruner, I enjoy him as a kind of an action star, a low-budget B-movie action star, but it has to be said, his acting is a little subdued at times, you might say, a little bit, on the kind of like the down low is the best way I can kind of describe it. Now, maybe they're not most charismatic of actors. I think he's perfectly good for the kind of the action roles, and he obviously has a physical kind of prowess about him, but when he's asked to do kind of more of the dramatic side of stuff, then it kind of, he struggles just a little bit, to be honest. So, and the actual actions itself, like I said, it's not necessarily a bad film, but I don't think it's really, it doesn't really kind of set itself apart, even compared to other kind of like lower budgets, B-movie kind of science fiction movies. That being said, I have to say, I think because of the kind of the good job in world building here, and just the kind of the filling out of all this kind of the elements that surround the kind of the main story, there's a lot kind of going on here, and the kind of like these Starship Troopers little sort of style little kind of ads that kind of pop up, the kind of the introduction of the kind of the X Factor where you don't know who you can trust because it's such a lot of money, I think does push this movie up to a slightly above average film for its kind of ilk, if you like. So I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? Please do let me know what your thoughts are, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time.